It's the Eagle Community Television Forum with your host, Gary Shorman.
Hi everyone, I'm Gary Shorman and welcome to the Forum on Eagle Television. It's good to have you watching along as our program is brought to you by Hayes Med. I have a fun guest today, and we've been talking before the program, and I can tell this is going to be a great show, so hang on. Andrea Zody is our guest. Andrea, in real life, is a special ed teacher up at Hayes High. But her side career is now running the Boston Marathon. It's your third marathon, and just about what got you started? I'm going to start this way. What got you started running? And then we'll talk about some more of the specifics later on. But what actually got you started running?
Sure. Well, and thank you, by the way. About 8 years ago, started having back issues and decided I wanted to be proactive about that, and knew I just needed to get stronger. And I've never been an athlete, not coordinated in any way, but I figured I could at least put one foot in front of the other. So that began the journey, and I just love being in the outdoors too. So it was a win-win kind of a situation.
It's a good combination.
Yeah.
Just happened a week before the Boston Marathon. I was in a race in Kansas City. It was half marathon, but it was rainy and cold. I turned on the Boston Marathon to watch it, and it was crazy. Tell me about the day.
Well, it really was kind of a challenging day in some aspects.
Real challenging for most people, okay?
When it was, and everybody knew this was just the way it was going to be. You know, if you were out for a PR, that may or may not happen because of the weather, but we were told that 20-mile-an-hour headwinds, gusts to 35, rain, steady rain with periods of torrential rain. And now I don't know what the temperature was when the first wave went out. I know that there were some flakes flying before the first wave came out.
A bonus.
By the time I'm being in the last wave came about, it was about 43 degrees. So you know,
cold, windy, wet,
and
there was some areas where at times and it just seemed like it rained a lot. What did they do, for those that aren't familiar with these races, there were how many thousand in the race did you
There were 30,000 people.
30,000 people. So you take 6 or community times Hayes and then double it again, you get there all out running. What are the logistics for getting there, getting to the starting line? Because all 30 don't start at the same time.
Correct. There are waves. The waves consisted, for example, the first wave were those people who are mobility impaired. And then the male and female wheelchair athletes went in the next waves. And then the wave after that were the elite runners. And then there were 4 more waves going from the fastest times qualifying to the not so fastest times qualifying. And it seems like, if memory serves me correct, each wave went off about 25 minutes apart.
So in the meantime, what are you doing?
Well, of course, they start loading the buses early that morning because they'll bus you from Boston out to Hopkinton. And so you are scheduled to show up at a particular time to load the bus. So then you're not standing around. So I didn't load the bus until between 9 and 9:30. And then it's about a 45-minute ride up to Hopkinton. And when you arrive, I don't know if it was a high school or a junior college, but they drop you off at the football field, and the football field was sat down. And so, as you can well imagine, the rain running down into the football field. So I told my dad, I've walked through barnyards that were quite not so tedious. And so, you know, they had the tents set up. They called it Athletes Village and the porta potties and that kind of thing. So that was kind of like the holding area until your wave was called.
So not only do you have a long race, but you're standing in water and slush and doing that, getting started. So then, do you try to warm up, or do you just warm up along the route? How did you do that?
They tell you to wear warm clothing, and most people had rain ponchos over that. And as you approach the start line, there are places that you can take that warmer clothing off, and then they donate all of that to local communities. So you know that you're not going to see your clothing again, and that's fine. But I have to say, as I walked across the parking lot to the start line where people had left their clothing, because, you know, I mean, there were people 4 hours before that had started the race. So
thousands.
There are mountains of wet clothing everywhere, and all I could think of is, who is going to dry all of this clothing out so it can be donated? But
Who's
nonetheless,
doing the
it's a
laundry
good thing.
here?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's a good thing. Yeah. When you get in the race starts, you have your several thousand people in your wave doing this. As you're going through the race, at what point do you think, this is not a good idea? Well, did you ever get to that point?
I really didn't. Honestly, I really didn't, because I looked around at so many people, just people that I met along the way. For example, I met this one woman, Laura, who was running for a cancer charity, and as I come up behind her, she had a picture of an older gentleman, and it said, "Happy birthday, Bob." And I ran up beside her and I said, "Tell me about Bob." She goes, "Well, that's my dad, and he passed away recently from cancer, and I'm running for a charity to raise funds for that." So, you know, you really don't have time to feel sorry for yourself, because there are all these amazing stories. One young man at the bottom of Heartbreak Hill, and that's at mile 21, was really struggling. And I came up beside him and I said, "You know what, let's do this together. Let's do it together. This is Heartbreak Hill. This is going to be tough for everybody." And as he's really breathing laboriously, he says, "Drug-free 7 years, drug-free 7 years." And I said, "Then you've done harder things than this." I said, "Let's do it." So we ran up Heartbreak Hill together, and then he went his way and I went my way. And so, I mean, just stuff like that happening all weekend long. So
well, that's sort of the, I'll say, an adventure when you're doing this, because it's not easy. We'll talk about some of the training after we come back from the break, but when you do this, you end up with a lot of people that are there for different reasons. And, you know, obviously you got a chance to share some of that along the way.
yeah, yeah.
Heartbreak Hill, what does that mean? Sounds like a hard hill.
It's the hill along the course that has the highest elevation, 85 feet. By some people's standard, it's not that great of an elevation, but really where it's placed in the course, you know, mile 21. And right before that, mile 16 through probably 19, there are 3 hills, the Newton Hills, they call them. So you get over those, and then, you know, you've got Heartbreak Hill in front of you. It's an elevation loss overall, the course. But, I mean, there are some hills sprinkled in there.
Now, this was the 5th year since the bombing. What about security?
Security, police presence was everywhere. At the Expo Center on Sunday, they were checking bags. The entire 26-mile course was fenced off, so no one was going to be stepping onto the course. I mean, people were there to give high fives and such. And in fact, my family was really frustrated because they were trying to get down to the finish line, and it was so well gated off that they were having a difficult time. I mean, they were asking volunteers where to go and that kind of thing, and they were trying to find their way down. But you know, if you knew you needed to get across the street, you weren't going to wiggle in between the fencing, because the police presence was there to say, "Sorry, you can't do that. You're going to have to find your way to go around." So, yeah, I mean, I felt safe.
This was your 3rd marathon. How does this compare to, you had to qualify to get there?
Right.
And that was at what race? Where did you qualify?
In Loveland, Colorado.
Okay, and then you ran in Wichita one before that, correct?
Right, correct.
How does this race compare to those two?
Oh gosh, how does it compare? Well, I mean, I think in a sense you feel like you have arrived, because it is the mecca of the running
Super Bowl
world.
of running, yes.
It's the world's oldest long-running marathon. So, you know, there's something to be said about that. I just think because it's a legend of a race that, I mean, they've all been good in their own aspects, but somehow a person feels like they've arrived in some way, you know.
I was looking at that. It'd be a great way to arrive, but the rain and some certainly made it a challenge to those people. Do you know how many people, what percentage of people finished? What did? Do you have a number on
it was like, I want to say in the 90% something. I mean, like 93, 94% did finish. Yeah.
Wow,
you know,
it's amazing. It's amazing. And the training that goes into that, first you have to qualify to be there.
Yeah.
So that helps you, you know, set a certain bar for being there. But I had a chance to watch the runners that were coming in that were the top finishers coming through there, and just watching the strength that they had at the end of 26 miles to finish so strong was pretty good.
Watching some of those people finish, the elite runners.
But you mentioned attitude and how you take a look at it. We're going to come back and talk about that, and talk about what that means in your training, because you just don't go out and run one of these races. You got to have a lot of training. We'll talk about that with our guest, Andrea Zody, who is not only a special ed teacher, special education teacher at the high school, but she runs marathons. The most recent has been Boston. Back with more after this.
Hayes Med is your first and best choice for healthcare. They're the only facility providing tertiary level services in this region. With more than 70 physicians and 26 specialties ranging from heart, orthopedic, spine care, cancer, obstetrics and gynecology, wound care, rehabilitation and surgery, including the Da Vinci robotic surgery, Hayes Med is your comprehensive health provider for people throughout Western Kansas. Hayes Med, helping people be healthy.
Eagle Communications is your ultimate business partner. We provide business class phone with customizable features and fast, reliable internet. Your knowledgeable team at Technology Solutions has a broad base of IT services to meet your needs. Let the experts at Marketing Solutions get your message to the right people on the best platforms. The only piece missing is your business. Call Eagle Communications today at 877-61-EAGLE.
Welcome back to our forum program with our guest today, Boston Marathon runner Andrea Zody. And tell you what, you have your medal there. Can you hold your medal up for that and do that?
Sure.
Yeah, it's very cool. On the back, I noticed you had some things on the back that you can actually put in times, things like that if you want to do that. That's really cool. And you have the Boston Marathon jersey on, all cool things that you get. You mentioned, though, the expo, and that's where the runners could gather before the race.
Correct.
And after the race, maybe too, but probably mostly before, right?
Correct. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, that's where runners could go to pick up their bib. They're really tight security about that as well. Nobody else can pick it up. You have to have a government-issued ID. And beforehand, several weeks beforehand, they send you what's called a runner passport. So that has your information on it too, so you have to show that in your ID. So you pick up your bib and your goodies that they're giving away, and then all day long on Saturday they have speakers come in that you can just sit in on and be inspired, really.
That's how this got started. There's the Team Hoyt.
Correct.
And did you meet them, or just what's the story behind them?
Well, we had arrived in the Boston airport. And just to start there, my family and I were fortunate enough to meet up with, as an accident, Dr. Temple Grandin. And if you don't know her, she is a woman who experiences autism herself. And she is a professor out at University of Northern Colorado. And she's world renowned in designing humane cattle chutes for different. So that was awesome. We took a picture with her, and then we arrived at our hotel, and we were on the floor with the lounge area, and we walked in there just to check it out. And in the corner, I just stopped dead in my tracks, because there's Dick Hoyt giving an interview in the corner. So of course I'm thinking photo op with him, and another Team Hoyt member was there.
Well, tell our viewers here about Team Hoyt.
Team Hoyt is a father-son duo. They run many marathons. I think this was going to be their 33rd Boston Marathon. They've done Ironmans together, triathlons, that kind of thing. But Rick is my age. Rick is the son, and he has physical challenges. He uses a wheelchair. He's my age. And then his father was inspired many years ago to enter Rick into these races, because Rick told him after their first race, Dad, I don't feel disabled when we're running together. So that started off a whole long career. Dick is 77 now. Rick is 56. So anyway, got the photo op with Dick. Got to meet Rick at the expo the next day. And then the day after, Kathy, one of the Team Hoyt members, handed me a book with, we met in the lounge again, and handed me a book with their autographs. So that was pretty amazing.
That is. In fact, you used that word again because on the back I said, if you were to put one word on the back of your medal, what would it be? And the first word you thought of was amazing.
Yeah.
The race is one thing, but the people you meet there,
it was just great.
Really is what
yes.
makes it an amazing race.
Yeah, so if you don't know Team Hoyt, please Google them because they're very inspirational people.
Yeah, and it's no small feat what goes on when they're doing it. Include pulling on an Ironman, he's pulling his son in a canoe kind of thing through the water part
for
of that,
for 2.5 miles, and then it's a 100-mile bike ride, and then running a marathon.
Why not? Why not? Now, that's a lot of work. Somebody may say, I want to run the Boston Marathon. Where did you start when you said, hey, I want to do this? And how much training goes into running the marathon?
Well, qualifying, first of all, and then, you know, they have a cutoff for the qualifying because so many people end up qualifying, so they have to have a time cutoff. So you have to actually beat the qualifying time for a certain time. Every year they set that differently. And, you know, I just took a look at the course and looked at, you know, what we had here in this area that would kind of at least get some hill work in and replicate it somewhat. And south of Ellis was the big training run. And that's what I just would go do for the long runs.
How many miles would you put in a week training for this?
Gosh, I'm not a person that follows a rigid plan. So, you know, I did a day of strength training, and I might do a shorter run, 3 to 5 miles, and then I do a longer run on the weekends. And, you know, that ended up being anywhere between 18 and 22 miles. So, not a whole lot of miles each week.
And now your first race wasn't a marathon. What was your first was it a 5K and then went up and worked your way up kind of do that?
Yeah. And each time I said, oh, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do the 10K. Oh, I mean, my husband will tell you this. Oh, I'm not going to do a half marathon. But you know what? You probably experience the same thing. It's just like you just want to take that next step. Can I do it? Let's see.
But the time commitment is no small thing. When you have time for family, because you're out doing things like that.
Right.
When you're out running, you're not doing other things that sometimes you want to do. And
Correct.
then you have a job too that also takes time away from everything.
Yeah,
so,
you know how that goes.
Yeah, well, it's amazing the story that you tell about doing that, running that, being a part of what goes on, and then having seen that. If you haven't had a chance, maybe you can go online, take a look at some of the racing, but the rain was something. We don't get a lot of rain like that around here.
I know, I wish I could have brought some of it back because there was plenty to be had.
Especially from that football field where you were standing in the water down there doing that.
Yes.
Andrea Zody has been our guest here. Congratulations on a finish and doing that. I know it was a hard day to run, but your attitude carried you through, I can tell you that. 26.2 miles in the Boston Marathon. Thanks for watching this program. It's brought to you by HaysMed and by Eagle Communication, our community.